I found a USB drive hidden in my late husband's safe with videos of him teaching someone else's children, children I'd never seen before. What I discovered next about my own son destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm grateful you're here to listen. Stay with me until the very end, and please comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. At 70 years old, I'd believed I had already endured every form of grief life could deliver. I'd buried my husband Robert 6 months earlier after 42 years of marriage. The cancer had taken him quickly, too quickly for all the conversations we should have had, too quickly for proper goodbyes. But standing in his study that cold November afternoon, staring at the small silver USB drive I just found tucked behind a false panel in his desk safe, I realized I knew nothing about suffering yet. I'd only opened the safe to retrieve our property deed. My son Kenneth and his girlfriend Veronica had been pressuring me to consider selling the house, this sprawling four-bedroom home in Maplewood where Robert and I had raised Kenneth, where every corner held memories of birthday parties and holiday dinners and ordinary beautiful days. "It's too much house for one person, Mom," Kenneth had said just last week, his tone gentle but insistent. "The maintenance alone must be overwhelming. Veronica and I have been looking at some lovely assisted living communities that would be perfect for you." I smiled and changed the subject, as I always did when they brought it up. At 70, I was still perfectly capable of managing my own life, thank you very much. My morning walks were brisk, my mind sharp, my independence precious. The safe had opened easily. Robert had made sure I knew the combination years ago. Inside were the expected items, our marriage certificate, the house deed, his life insurance policy, my grandmother's diamond earrings. But wedged in the back corner, behind a stack of old tax returns, was something I'd never seen before. A small USB drive with a single word written on the label in Robert's distinctive handwriting: Legacy. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled it out. Robert had been meticulous about labeling everything. Our photo archives were organized by year and event. His work files had clear, descriptive names. But this single word, legacy, felt deliberately vague, almost secretive. I carried it to Robert's desk and sat in his leather chair, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered in the fabric. The computer took a moment to recognize the drive, and in that pause, I felt the first whisper of unease. What kind of legacy would Robert hide in a safe? The drive contained a single folder labeled with dates spanning the past 5 years. Inside were video files, dozens of them, each named with a date and location I didn't recognize. Oak Ridge Park, June 2019. Riverside Elementary, September 2020. Henderson Street, March 2021. I clicked on the oldest file, with my heart hammering against my ribs. Robert's face filled the screen, younger than I'd seen him in his final months, healthy and vibrant. He was sitting on a park bench, and beside him was a boy of about 8 or 9 years old with dark curly hair and gap-toothed smile. "Okay, Michael, let's try the multiplication tables again. Remember what I told you about the pattern in the nines?" The boy, Michael, nodded eagerly, and Robert began walking him through the lesson with the same gentle teaching style he'd used with Kenneth decades ago. I watched in stunned silence as my husband tutored this child I'd never heard of, never seen in any family photo, never knew existed. The video was 20 minutes long. Robert was kind, encouraging, celebrating when Michael got an answer right, gently redirecting when he struggled. At the end, Michael hugged Robert tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Robert. You're the best teacher ever." "You're doing great, buddy. Same time next week?" The video ended. I sat frozen in the chair, my mind racing through impossible explanations. Had Robert been volunteering as a tutor? But why hide it? Why keep it secret from me? With shaking fingers, I opened another file. This one showed Robert with a different child, a girl of about 7 with braids and bright pink glasses. They were at what looked like a library, working through a comprehension worksheet. Another video showed him teaching a teenage boy how to solve algebra equations at a kitchen table I didn't recognize. Another featured him helping twin girls with a science project about the solar system. Video after video, year after year. My husband teaching children I'd never met, in places I'd never been, living what appeared to be an entire secret life I knew nothing about. My chest felt tight. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Who were these kids? Why had Robert hidden this from me? And why label it legacy, as if it were something precious, something meaningful, something worth preserving in his safe alongside our most important documents? I was about to close the folder when I noticed one video file that stood out from the others. The date was recent, just 2 months before Robert's diagnosis. But unlike the other files with their location labels, this one was simply titled, "For Margaret. Watch this one last." Margaret. My name. He'd made a video for me?
My hands were trembling so badly I could barely control the mouse, but I managed to click the file open. Robert's face appeared on screen, but this time he wasn't with any children. He was alone in what looked like his office at work, and his expression was serious, almost somber. "Margaret," he began, and the sound of his voice saying my name made tears spring to my eyes. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you found my secret. I'm so sorry you had to discover it this way. I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid of hurting you, afraid of destroying what we had, afraid of facing the truth myself." He paused, running his hand through his hair in that familiar gesture of stress I'd seen 1,000 times. "The children you've seen in these videos, they're not random students I was tutoring. Margaret, they're Kenneth's children, our grandchildren, children we never got to meet because Kenneth has been hiding them from us for years." The world stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was hearing. Kenneth had children? Multiple children? And had kept them secret? Robert continued, his voice heavy with pain. "I discovered the truth 3 years ago by accident. I ran into Kenneth at a school event. He was there picking up his oldest, Michael. He panicked when he saw me, begged me not to tell you, promised he would explain everything eventually. Like a fool, I agreed to wait. I thought I was protecting you from pain, but I see now I was just enabling his deception." My husband's image blurred as tears filled my eyes. "Kenneth told me he couldn't tell us about the children because of Veronica. She didn't want us in their lives, said we were too traditional, too judgmental, that we'd interfere with how they wanted to raise their family. He chose her wishes over our right to know our own grandchildren." Robert's face hardened with an emotion I rarely saw in him, anger. But I couldn't stay away completely. I arranged to meet the children secretly to be part of their lives even if it had to be hidden. I tutored them, taught them things, tried to be the grandfather they deserved even though they could never know who I really was. They think I'm just Mr. Robert, a kind volunteer who helps with homework. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes intense. "Margaret, I'm leaving you this video because you need to know the truth. Kenneth has been lying to both of us for years. Those children, Michael, Sarah, Lucas, and the twins Emma and Olivia, they're brilliant and kind and deserve to know their grandmother. They deserve to know you." The video showed Robert pulling out several photographs, holding them up to the camera one by one. School pictures of 5 beautiful children with Kenneth's eyes, his smile, his expressions. My grandchildren. 5 grandchildren I'd never held, never celebrated birthdays with, never watched grow up. "Veronica has been controlling everything," Robert continued. "She's isolated Kenneth from us gradually over the years, and he's let her do it. Every time they visit, it's on her terms, on her schedule. Every conversation is monitored. And the children, our grandchildren, they don't even know we exist." The rage building in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt. I documented everything, Margaret, all these videos, all these moments with the children. I wanted you to see what we've been robbed of. I wanted you to have proof of what Kenneth has allowed to happen. And I wanted you to know that it's not too late. These children need you, even if they don't know it yet. Robert's expression softened, becoming the gentle man I'd loved for over 4 decades. I love you, Margaret. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry I let this go on for so long. But please, don't let my mistakes continue. Fight for those children. Fight for your right to be their grandmother. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Don't let Veronica and Kenneth take this from you. The video ended. I sat in Robert's chair, in his study, in our home that suddenly felt like a mausoleum of lies. And I finally understood what true betrayal felt like. My husband had kept this secret for 3 years. My son had hidden 5 children from me even longer. And Veronica, the woman who smiled so sweetly at family dinners, who called me mom, who pretended to care about my well-being, had orchestrated the entire deception. The pressure in my chest erupted into a sound I barely recognized as coming from my own throat, a wail of grief and fury that echoed through the empty house. I had 5 grandchildren. 5 beautiful children who thought I didn't exist or didn't care about them. 5 young lives that should have been filled with my love, my cookies, my stories, my hugs. And Kenneth, my only child, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything to give a good life, had stolen that from me. But as I sat there surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal, I felt something else rising beneath the grief. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. Robert had been too weak to fight back, too afraid of conflict to demand what was right. But I was 70 years old, I'd survived loss and heartbreak, and I'd raised a son who clearly learned nothing about loyalty or family. If Kenneth and Veronica thought they could keep my grandchildren from me, they were about to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating Margaret. This wasn't over, not by a long shot.
The days between Thursday night's discovery and Sunday's planned confrontation felt like living in 2 separate realities. On the surface, I went through the normal motions of daily life: grocery shopping, morning walks, responding to emails from the church auxiliary committee. But underneath, I was conducting a methodical investigation into my son's secret life, and what I discovered made Theodore's revelations seem like just the tip of an iceberg. Friday morning, I woke at dawn after barely sleeping. My mind had churned all night with questions that demanded answers. How long had Preston been hiding his children? Where exactly did they live? What else had he lied about? And most importantly, how could I use the next few days to gather enough ammunition to make Sunday's confrontation impossible for him to deflect or deny? I made coffee and returned to Theodore's study, where the USB drive still sat in the computer like a loaded weapon. But this time, I wasn't looking at the videos themselves. I was looking for details in the backgrounds, searching for clues about where these videos had been filmed. The first video with Michael at Riverside Park, I paused and studied the background carefully. Behind Theodore and the boy, I could see a distinctive red bridge spanning a small creek, and in the distance, a playground with bright yellow slides. I opened my laptop and searched Riverside Park, Red Bridge, Pennsylvania. 3 results came up, but only one was within reasonable driving distance: Riverside Park in Thorndale, a suburb about 45 minutes from Willowbrook. I pulled up the park on Google Maps and switched to Street View. There it was. The same red bridge, the same playground, and the same bench configuration where Theodore and Michael had sat. Thorndale. Preston lived in Thorndale. I felt a sick twist in my stomach. We'd asked Preston about his address dozens of times over the years. He'd always been vague, citing frequent moves due to rising rent prices or looking for better neighborhoods. The last address we had on file was for an apartment in Center City, Philadelphia from 4 years ago, which he'd claimed to have left for something with more space. More space for 5 children, apparently. I went through each video systematically, cataloging every background detail. The library where Theodore had helped Sophia with reading had a distinctive mural of storybook characters on the wall behind them. A search revealed it was Pinewood Branch Library, also in Thorndale. The kitchen table where he tutored Lucas showed a window overlooking a backyard with a very specific cedar fence pattern and what looked like a trampoline. Preston owned a house large enough for 5 children with a backyard in a nice suburb, while he'd been telling us he was struggling to make ends meet and saving up for something more permanent. I pulled up the Thorndale Property Records database, public information, accessible to anyone. I searched for Preston Whitmore and held my breath. Nothing. I tried Preston Harrison Whitmore, his full legal name. Still nothing. Then, on a hunch that made my blood boil, I searched for Giselle Mercado. There it was, 428 Oakmont Drive, Thorndale, purchased 6 years ago, a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom colonial valued at $485,000. I clicked on the property details and a real estate photo gallery loaded. My hands trembled as I scrolled through images of a beautiful home with hardwood floors, a modern kitchen, a finished basement, and that backyard, the same backyard I'd seen through the window in Lucas's tutoring video, complete with the cedar fence and trampoline. They'd bought a house 6 years ago when Preston had told us he and Giselle were just dating casually and he was focused on building his career before settling down. 6 years ago would have made Michael about 5 years old. Sophia would have been 3. Lucas would have been 7. Preston had already had 3 children when he'd stood in our living room and talked about his casual relationship and his focus on career building. I opened a new document on my laptop and started building a timeline, cross-referencing everything I could remember with the evidence I was finding. 2017, Preston introduces us to Giselle, describes her as someone I've been seeing for a few months, claims they're taking things slow. 2018, property records show Giselle purchases house in Thorndale. Preston tells us he's thinking about moving out of the city for a quieter lifestyle. When we offer to help with a down payment, he says he's not ready for that commitment yet. 2018 June. First video on Theodore's USB drive shows him tutoring Michael, age 7, at Riverside Park. Based on Michael's current age of 11, he would have been born around 2012. 2019. Preston starts declining holiday invitations, says he's really swamped with work and needs to focus on some personal projects. We accept this, assuming he's trying to advance his career. 2019 September. Videos show Theodore tutoring Sophia, age 6, suggesting she was born around 2013. 2020, pandemic hits. Preston barely communicates with us for months, claiming he's overwhelmed with adjusting to remote work. Meanwhile, videos from this period show Theodore wearing masks while tutoring Lucas, age 10, born around 2010, in the backyard of what I now knew was Preston's house. 2021. Preston tells us he and Giselle are getting more serious and thinking about long-term plans. No mention that they already have 4 children and have been living together for years. Videos from this period introduce the twins, Emma and Olivia, age 3, born around 2018. 2022. Preston proposes to Giselle, shows us a ring. We're thrilled, thinking our son is finally settling down. We offer to plan an engagement party. He declines, saying they want something small and intimate, just close friends. The engagement party never happens. Neither does a wedding. When we ask about wedding plans, he says they've decided to have a long engagement to save money. 2023. Theodore dies. Preston attends the funeral with Giselle. Both are appropriately somber. Preston gives a eulogy about what a wonderful father Theodore was, how much he'll miss him, how grateful he is for everything his dad taught him. No mention that Theodore had been secretly meeting with Preston's children for 3 years. No acknowledgement that Theodore died knowing his son was a liar. 2024. Present. Preston begins pressuring me to sell the house and move to assisted living. Giselle suddenly becomes very involved in these discussions, offering to help research options and support me through the transition. The timeline laid out in black and white was damning. This wasn't a recent deception or a complicated situation that had gotten away from him. This was systematic, calculated dishonesty spanning over a decade. Preston had been lying to us since before his first child was born. I sat back from the computer, feeling physically ill.
What kind of person does this? What kind of son builds an entire life, a house, a family, 5 children, and hides it from his own parents? My phone buzzed with a text message. Preston. Hey, Mom. Just wanted to check in. How are you feeling today? Giselle and I are really looking forward to Sunday dinner. Is there anything special you'd like us to bring? The casual cheerfulness of it made me want to scream. He was so comfortable with his deception, so practiced at maintaining this false relationship with me. I forced myself to respond normally. I'm doing well, sweetheart. Just bring yourselves. I'm planning to make pot roast, your favorite. Perfect. Can't wait. Love you, Mom. Heart. I set the phone down and returned to my investigation. If I was going to confront Preston effectively, I needed more than just Theodore's videos and property records. I needed to understand the full scope of what had been hidden from me. I opened Facebook and searched for Preston's profile. His account was heavily privacy locked. I could see his profile picture, a photo of him and Giselle from what looked like a hiking trip, but nothing else. We weren't Facebook friends, which should have been my first clue years ago that something was wrong. What kind of son isn't Facebook friends with his own mother? I tried Giselle's profile next. Also locked down tight. But her profile picture showed her smiling at a beach, and in the background I could make out the blurry figures of children playing in the sand. My grandchildren. Right there, in her profile picture. Close enough to see, but too blurred to recognize. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. I created a fake Facebook account, something I'd never imagined doing, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I used a stock photo of a middle-aged woman, created a believable backstory about being a fellow parent at Oakmont Elementary, and sent friend requests to several people whose names I'd found by searching for Oakmont Elementary PTA members. 3 people accepted within an hour. From their profiles, I started finding tagged photos and public posts about school events. And there, in a photo album from Oakmont Elementary Spring Festival 2024, I found them. All 5 of my grandchildren, clearly labeled in the photo tags. Michael Mercado Whitmore, standing with his science fair project about solar system scale. Sophia Mercado Whitmore, at the face painting booth, her cheek decorated with a butterfly. Lucas Mercado Whitmore, playing soccer during the field day activities. Emma and Olivia Mercado Whitmore, sitting together on a bench eating ice cream, identical in their matching sundresses. Mercado Whitmore. They had hyphenated last names. Preston had given his children his surname, but only attached to Giselle's, as if his family history began and ended with her. I scrolled through months of photos, my heart breaking with each image. Birthday parties I'd never been invited to, Halloween costumes I'd never seen, Christmas mornings I'd never shared, school performances I'd never attended, soccer games and dance recitals and ordinary, beautiful moments that grandparents are supposed to be part of. There was a particularly devastating photo from last Christmas. All 7 of them in matching pajamas, posed in front of a massive Christmas tree, looking like the picture-perfect family. The caption read, "Grateful for our little tribe. Best Christmas ever. Heart." Last Christmas, when Preston had told me they couldn't make it to our family dinner because Giselle had family obligations and he really needed to support her during the holidays. He'd been 15 minutes away, celebrating with the family he chose over me. I kept digging, and what I found painted an even more disturbing picture. Giselle's Instagram account was public, apparently part of her lifestyle brand as a wellness coach and intentional parenting advocate. Her feed was full of carefully curated posts about their alternative lifestyle choices. Raising free-range kids in a structured world, accompanied by a photo of the children playing unsupervised in a park. Why we chose
unschooling over traditional education, with a long caption about how public schools crush creativity and independent thought. Our journey to conscious uncoupling from toxic family patterns, which made my blood run cold until I read further and realized she was talking about her own family, not ours. Apparently, Giselle had cut off her own parents years ago for being emotionally manipulative and unable to respect boundaries. But it was a post from 2 years ago that made everything click into place. Real talk about protecting your children from generational trauma. When partner and I started our family, we made the difficult decision to limit contact with extended family members who couldn't respect our parenting choices. It's not about being cruel, it's about breaking cycles of judgment, control, and outdated thinking. Our kids deserve to grow up in an environment of unconditional acceptance, not one where they're constantly measured against traditional expectations they never asked to meet. To the grandparents reading this, if you want to be in your grandchildren's lives, you need to earn that privilege by respecting the parents' autonomy. Our children are rules, no exceptions. The post had hundreds of comments, mostly supportive responses from other conscious parents congratulating her on setting healthy boundaries. But a few comments pushed back. But don't grandparents have rights too? And this seems really extreme. What if they're good people who just have different opinions? Giselle had responded to these with the same energy. Grandparents have the right to meet our standards or not be involved. We're not obligated to expose our children to toxic dynamics just because of blood relations. I read it 3 times, feeling the rage build with each pass. This was the ideology that had stolen my grandchildren from me. Not Preston's independent decision, but Giselle's rigid philosophy that anyone who didn't align perfectly with her parenting choices was toxic and needed to be excluded. And Preston had gone along with it, had chosen this woman's absolute control over his own mother's right to know her grandchildren existed. I needed to talk to someone, to process what I was discovering, to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. "Beatrice, how are you, dear?" Margaret Sullivan's warm voice came through the line. Margaret had been my best friend for 35 years, since our sons had been in preschool together. Our friendship had survived her move to Delaware 10 years ago, maintained through regular phone calls and annual visits. "Margaret, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting, because if I stop talking, I might lose my nerve." Her tone shifted immediately. "I'm listening." I told her everything. The USB drive, Theodore's secret, the 5 grandchildren, Preston's decade of lies, Giselle's controlling ideology, all of it spilling out in a rush of words and suppressed tears. When I finally finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Margaret, are you still there?" "I'm here." Her voice was shaking. "Beatrice, I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine. 5 grandchildren. 5. And Preston just... How could he do this to you?" "I don't know. That's what I keep coming back to. How could my son, the boy I raised, the man I thought I knew, how could he do this?" "It's Giselle," Margaret said firmly. "I never liked her. Remember when I met her at Theodore's funeral? There was something cold about her. The way she watched you and Preston interact, like she was monitoring everything he said. I thought I was imagining it, but now..." "She has an Instagram," I said bitterly. "She posts about protecting children from toxic family patterns and earning the privilege of grandparent access. She's convinced Preston we're dangerous influences who need to be kept away from their children." "But you've never even met the children. How can you be a bad influence on kids you don't know exist?" "That's the point. She's judged us preemptively, decided we're too traditional, too religious, too whatever, and cut us out before we ever had a chance." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "Sunday night, they're coming for dinner. They think I'm going to ask for help downsizing and moving to assisted living. Instead, I'm going to lay out everything I know and demand access to my grandchildren." "Beatrice, be careful. If you push too hard, Preston might cut you off completely." "He's already cut me off. I just didn't know it. At least this way, I'll have the truth out in the open." We talked for another hour, with Margaret helping me organize my thoughts and plan my approach. She'd been a social worker before retiring, and her professional insight was invaluable. "You need to be strategic," she advised. "Don't lead with anger, even though you have every right to be furious. Lead with the children's well-being. Make it about what's best for them, not what was stolen from you." "But it was stolen from me." "I know, and that's valid. But Preston and Giselle have convinced themselves they're protecting their children. If you come at them with accusations and demands, they'll dig in deeper. But if you can make them see that the children are being harmed by not having a grandmother in their lives, you might have a chance." After we hung up, I spent Saturday preparing for Sunday's dinner with military precision. I printed out selected stills from Theodore's videos, images of my grandchildren's faces that I'd never seen before. I compiled screenshots from Giselle's Instagram showing their life in Thorndale. I created a document timeline of Preston's lies over the years.
But I also did something else. I wrote a letter to each of my grandchildren, children who didn't know I existed, but who I already loved with a fierce, protective intensity. "Dear Michael, my name is Beatrice Whitmore, and I'm your grandmother, your father's mother. You don't know me, and that's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault, except the adults who decided to keep us apart. I've watched videos of your grandfather teaching you mathematics, and I can see how brilliant you are. Your love of astronomy reminds me so much of your father at your age. He used to drag me outside on clear nights to point out constellations, just like I imagine you do now. I want you to know that you have a grandmother who would love to hear about your dreams of becoming an astronaut, who would love to take you to the planetarium or help you build a telescope, or just sit and listen while you explain the wonders of the universe. I don't know when you'll read this letter, or if you ever will, but I want you to know that you've been loved by grandparents you never met. Your grandfather Theodore adored you, and I already adore you too, even though we've never spoken. You deserve to know where you come from. You deserve to know your family history, and you deserve to have a grandmother in your life if you want one. With all my love, your grandmother, Beatrice." "I have every right," I said, my voice rising. "I'm their grandmother. Those children are my blood, my family, my legacy, and you stole them from me." "We didn't steal anything," Giselle shot back. "We made parenting decisions about who we want influencing our children." "Based on what? You've never given me a chance. You decided I was toxic before I even knew those children existed." Preston finally found his voice. "Mom, please, this isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Then how, Preston? How exactly did you plan for me to find out? At your children's college graduations? Their weddings? Never?" He couldn't meet my eyes. I stood up and walked to Theodore's study, returning with the folder of evidence. I spread the photos across the dinner table, covering the plates of pot roast with images of my grandchildren. "Look at them," I demanded. "Michael at his science fair, Sophia learning to read, Lucas struggling with homework, the twins at the beach. Look at everything you took from me." Preston's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the photos. "Your father died knowing you were lying to me," I said, my voice breaking. "He spent 3 years secretly meeting your children because you were too much of a coward to stand up to her." I pointed at Giselle. "He died thinking he was protecting me from pain, when really he was just enabling your betrayal." "That's not fair," Preston started. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? I raised you alone after your father worked 60-hour weeks so we could give you a good life.
I sacrificed my career, my independence, my dreams to make sure you had every opportunity. And you repaid me by cutting me out of your children's lives before they were even born? The tears were flowing freely now, years of suppressed grief and anger pouring out. I deserved to hold those babies. I deserved to watch them take their first steps. I deserved to read them bedtime stories and bake them cookies and be their grandmother. You stole that from me, Preston. You and her. Giselle stood up abruptly. We're leaving. No, I said firmly. You're going to sit down and listen to what I have to say. Because if you walk out that door right now, I'm taking everything I found to a lawyer tomorrow morning. Preston snapped up. A lawyer? Grandparents have rights, Preston. I've already consulted with an attorney. In Pennsylvania, grandparents can petition for visitation rights, especially when they've been deliberately excluded from children's lives without cause. You wouldn't, Giselle said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. Try me. I have nothing left to lose. You've already taken everything that mattered. You've already destroyed my relationship with my son. The only thing left is my relationship with those children. And I will fight for that with every resource I have. Preston was crying now, his face in his hands. Mom, please, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Then why did it? Why, Preston? Give me one good reason why you hid 5 children from me for years. He looked up at me, then at Giselle, then at me. His face was anguished, torn between the 2 most important women in his life. And in that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that I had already lost this battle. Because when forced to choose, Preston would choose Giselle. He always had. And that realization hurt more than anything else that had happened. The silence that followed my ultimatum stretched for what felt like an eternity. Preston sat frozen, caught between his mother's pain and his girlfriend's fury. Giselle's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles working beneath her skin. Finally, Preston spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we have a moment alone, please? I nodded curtly and walked into the kitchen, though I positioned myself where I could hear their urgent whispers from the dining room. This is exactly what I warned you about, Giselle hissed. Your mother is manipulative and controlling. Look at how she's ambushing us with threats and legal action. She just found out she has 5 children she never knew about. What did you expect her reaction to be? I expected you to have handled the situation before it got to this point. You promised me she'd never find out. You swore those videos were destroyed. I didn't know Dad kept copies. I thought, you didn't think, Preston. That's the problem. You never think about consequences. Their voices dropped too low for me to hear clearly, but the tone was unmistakably hostile. I busied myself washing dishes that didn't need washing, giving them time while my heart hammered against my ribs. When they finally emerged from the dining room, both looked composed but strained. Preston's eyes were red-rimmed. Giselle's expression was carefully neutral, the mask of politeness back in place. Mom, Preston began, sitting down at the kitchen table, I owe you an explanation, a real one. I dried my hands and joined them, keeping my expression open but guarded. Preston took a deep breath. When Giselle and I found out she was pregnant with Lucas, that was 11 years ago, we were terrified. We weren't married, we'd only been together for 8 months, and we had no idea what we were doing. You could have told us, I said quietly. We would have helped. I know, but Giselle's parents reacted so badly when she told them. They called her irresponsible, said she was throwing her life away, demanded she consider adoption. It was traumatic for her.
Giselle spoke up, her voice controlled. My parents made it clear that if I kept the baby, they would cut me off financially and emotionally. They said I was making a selfish choice that would ruin my future. So you assumed we'd react the same way? I asked. Not exactly, Preston said. But you and Dad were so traditional, Catholic, conservative about marriage and family. We knew you'd pressure us to get married immediately, and we weren't ready for that. We wanted to build our relationship on our own terms." "So you just disappeared?" "Not right away. At first, we were going to tell you after Lucas was born, but then Giselle's parents showed up at the hospital and caused this huge scene. Her mother actually tried to convince the nurses that Giselle was mentally unstable and couldn't consent to taking the baby home." Giselle's hands were trembling slightly as she spoke. "It was the most terrifying day of my life, having my own mother try to take my child from me. After that, I couldn't risk it happening again. I couldn't risk anyone who might judge our choices having access to our children." "I'm not your mother, Giselle," I said firmly. "I would never try to take your children from you." "But you would have judged us," she replied. "You would have pressured Preston to marry me, to raise the children Catholic, to follow all the traditional rules that we decided weren't right for our family. You don't know that. You never gave me a chance to prove otherwise." Preston ran his hair through his head in frustration. "Mom, be honest. If I'd come to you 11 years ago and said, Giselle's pregnant, we're not getting married, and we're not baptizing the baby, what would you have said?" I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it. Because he was right. 11 years ago, I would have been shocked. I would have tried to convince them that marriage was the right choice. I probably would have pushed for baptism and religious education. I might have been surprised, I admitted, but I would have gotten over it. I would have chosen being part of my grandchild's life over my preferences about how you raised him. "But we couldn't risk that," Giselle said. "We couldn't risk you trying to influence our children with beliefs and values we'd explicitly rejected. So you made the decision for me. You decided I was unfit to be a grandmother based on assumptions, not evidence." "We were protecting our family," Giselle insisted. "Your family includes Preston, and Preston includes me. You didn't protect your family, you fractured it." The argument was circular, getting us nowhere. I could see the fundamental disconnect. Giselle saw her children as exclusively hers and Preston's, with no obligation to extended family. I saw them as part of a larger family unit that included grandparents, history, and legacy. "I need to know something," I said, changing tactics. "The other children, Michael, Sophia, Emma, and Olivia, were those pregnancies also hidden from me?" Preston's face flushed with shame. "Yes. After Lucas, we'd already established the pattern of keeping you at a distance. Each time Giselle got pregnant, we'd discuss telling you, but it never seemed like the right time. 5 times, 5 pregnancies, 5 births, 5 children, and not once was it the right time?" I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you understand that every milestone I missed can never be recovered? First words, first steps, first days of school, all gone. Forever? Giselle stood up abruptly. "This guilt trip isn't productive. What's done is done. The question is what happens now." "What happens now is that I meet my grandchildren," I said firmly. "That's non-negotiable." "Everything is negotiable," Giselle countered. "Those are our children. We decide who has access to them." "Not if a court decides otherwise." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You'd really drag us through a legal battle? Put your own son through that? You'd really force me to put your own children through the trauma of court-ordered visitation instead of just doing the right thing?" Preston stood up, positioning himself physically between us. "Stop, both of you, just stop. This isn't solving anything." He turned to Giselle. "You're right. The kids deserve to know their grandmother, and Mom deserves to know them." Giselle's expression hardened. "Preston, no, listen, I've been thinking about this for years. Every time I watched Dad with the kids, I felt guilty. Every holiday Mom spent alone, I felt guilty. I'm tired of living like this." "We agreed," Giselle started. "You decided," Preston interrupted, and I saw real anger in his eyes for the first time.
You decided and I went along with it because I was afraid of losing you, but I'm losing my mother instead and I can't do this anymore." Giselle's face went pale. "So you're choosing her over me?" "I'm choosing honesty over deception. I'm choosing to let my kids know their grandmother. That's not choosing anyone over anyone else." "It is if I'm not comfortable with it." "Then maybe you need to work on why you're not comfortable with the 70-year-old woman who's never done anything to you having a relationship with her own grandchildren." The shift in dynamics was startling. For the first time, Preston was standing up to Giselle, and she clearly didn't know how to respond. "I need some air," Giselle said tightly, grabbing her purse and walking toward the front door. "Preston, I'll be in the car. Take all the time you need to decide where your loyalties lie." The door closed with a sharp click, leaving Preston and I alone in the kitchen. He slumped back into his chair, looking exhausted. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for all of it." I sat down across from him, studying the face of the son I'd raised but barely recognized anymore. "Why did you let it go on for so long?"
"Because I'm weak," he said simply. "Because Giselle is strong and certain about everything, and I'm neither of those things. Because it was easier to lie to you than to stand up to her. Your father wasn't weak, but he kept the secret too. Dad was trying to protect you. I was trying to protect myself." Preston's voice cracked. "That's the difference." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 11 years of deception hanging between us. "Tell me about them," I said softly. "Tell me about my grandchildren." Preston's face transformed as he began to talk. "Lucas is 13 now. He's incredible with his hands, builds things constantly. Legos, model rockets, wooden furniture. He struggles in traditional school because he can't sit still, but his mind is always working. Your father mentioned ADHD. Yeah, Giselle refuses to medicate him, thinks it's overdiagnosed. But we found a therapist who works with him on coping strategies, and he's doing better." "And Michael?" "Michael is brilliant, scary brilliant. He taught himself basic coding when he was 8. Now he's building apps and talking about quantum physics. He's quiet, keeps to himself, but when he opens up about something he's passionate about, you can't get him to stop talking." I smiled, picturing this grandson I'd never met. "He sounds wonderful." "She's our sensitive one. She feels everything deeply. She cries at sad movies, brings home stray cats, writes poetry about clouds. She had a reading disability that made early school really hard, but she's caught up now. She wants to be a veterinarian." "And the twins?" Preston's face softened completely. "Emma and Olivia are chaos incarnate. They're 6 and have more energy than the rest of us combined. Emma's the leader, always planning adventures. Olivia is the follower, always getting them into trouble by going along with Emma's schemes. They're hilarious and exhausting and absolutely inseparable." "They sound like they need a grandmother," I said gently. "They do. They all do." Preston looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I've deprived them of that, and I've deprived you of them. I don't know how to fix it." "You start by telling the truth. You tell them I exist. You bring them to meet me. Giselle will fight this. Then you fight back. Preston, you're their father. You have just as much right to make decisions about their lives as she does. She'll say, I'm betraying her trust, breaking our agreement. Your agreement was built on a lie. You can't betray something that was never legitimate in the first place." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I know you're right. I just don't know if I'm strong enough to do this. You're stronger than you think. You're my son. You have my stubbornness and your father's principles somewhere inside you. You just have to decide to use them." Preston reached across the table and took my hand. "I want them to know you. I want them to hear your stories about Dad, about me growing up, about our family history. I want them to have what I had. Then make it happen." He squeezed my hand. I'll talk to Giselle. I'll make her understand that this is happening with or without her approval. But Mom, I need you to promise me something. What? When you meet the kids, don't tell them about the years we kept you apart. Don't make them feel guilty for something that wasn't their fault. I would never do that. And don't push religion on them. I know it's important to you, but Giselle and I are raising them secular, and I need you to respect that. I bristled slightly, but nodded. I'll respect your parenting choices, but I won't hide who I am either. If they ask about my faith, I'll be honest. That's fair. We heard a car horn honk outside, Giselle clearly impatient. Preston stood up. I should go. We need to have a serious conversation, and it's not going to be pleasant. I walked him to the door. Preston, thank you for finally choosing honestly. He hugged me tightly. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry it took me so long to show it. After they left, I sat in the living room for a long time, processing everything that had happened. The confrontation hadn't gone exactly as I'd planned, but it had cracked open the door to a relationship with my grandchildren. The next morning, I called Margaret to update her. He stood up to her? Margaret sounded shocked. Preston actually stood up to Giselle? Eventually, after I threatened legal action and laid out all the evidence, but yes, he did. That's progress, but Beatrice, don't get your hopes up too high. Giselle strikes me as the type who doesn't back down easily. I know, but Preston seemed genuine. He talked about the kids with such love. He wants this to work. Wanting it and making it happen are two different things, especially with someone like Giselle pulling strings. Margaret's skepticism proved prescient. 3 days passed with no word from Preston. I texted him twice, gentle messages asking how he was doing, but received no response. On the 4th day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I drove to Thorndale, to the address I'd found in the property records. 428 Oakmont Drive was a beautiful colonial house with a wide front porch and a carefully maintained lawn. A basketball hoop stood in the driveway, and I could see a trampoline in the backyard. My grandchildren's home. I parked across the street and watched, feeling like a stalker but unable to stop myself. At 3:15, a school bus stopped at the corner and children spilled out. My breath caught as I recognized them from the photos and videos. Lucas, tall and lanky, headphones on, walking with the distracted gait of someone lost in thought. Michael, smaller and neater, carrying a heavy backpack and talking animatedly to his brother. Sophia, trailing behind, her nose in a book as she walked. And the twins, bouncing off the bus hand in hand, their backpacks are nearly as big as they are, chattering away at high speed. My grandchildren, right there, real and solid and beautiful.
But I stayed in my car, knowing that approaching them without Preston's permission would only make things worse. That evening, Preston finally called. Mom, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. Things have been complicated. How complicated? He sighed heavily. Giselle is furious. She thinks you manipulated me, that you're trying to control our family. She's threatening to take the kids and move if I insist on this. My stomach dropped. She can't do that. You're their father. She can make life very difficult. And Mom, I have to think about what's best for the kids. A custody battle, fighting between their parents, that's not good for them either. So, you're backing down? After everything you said? I'm not backing down. I'm trying to find a compromise that doesn't blow up my family. Your family is already broken, Preston. It's been broken for 11 years. You're just finally seeing the cracks. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You can't keep sacrificing honest relationships to maintain fake peace. It doesn't work. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. But I need you to be patient.
I've been patient for 70 years of not knowing these children existed. How much more patience do you expect? Just give me some time to work on Giselle. Let me find the right approach. After we hung up, I felt the familiar weight of disappointment settling over me. Preston was backsliding, letting Giselle reassert control. But I wasn't going to wait passively for my son to find his courage. The next day, I called the lawyer I'd consulted before the confrontation. Elena Martinez was a family law attorney in her 50s with a reputation for handling grandparents' rights cases. "Mrs. Whitmore?" She greeted me warmly. "How did the conversation with your son go?" "Mixed results. He acknowledged the situation, but is now waffling under pressure from his girlfriend. That's unfortunately common. What would you like to do?" "I want to know my options. Real, concrete options for seeing my grandchildren." Elena pulled up her notes. "Pennsylvania law does allow grandparents to petition for visitation rights, but there are specific criteria that must be met. The court considers the best interests of the children, the relationship between grandparent and grandchildren, and whether granting visitation would interfere with the parent-child relationship. The children don't know me. Does that hurt my case?" "It complicates it, but doesn't eliminate it. The fact that you were deliberately excluded despite wanting contact works in your favor. And the videos from your late husband showing him with the children demonstrate a pre-existing family connection, even if you weren't aware of it." "What would the process involve?" "We'd file a petition with the court. There would be a hearing where both sides present their case. A custody evaluator might be assigned to assess the family situation. It's not quick. These cases can take 6 months to a year. And at the end, what are the chances I'd actually get visitation?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, about 60-40 in your favor. The deliberate exclusion and your husband's documented relationship with the children are strong points. But courts are hesitant to override parents' wishes without clear evidence of harm to the children. What if I can prove that keeping me away is harming them?" "That would strengthen your case significantly. Do you have evidence of harm?" I thought about what Theodore had said in his video. Michael struggling with Preston's emotional distance, Sophia's anxiety, Lucas falling through the cracks at school. I might. My husband documented concerns about the children's well-being in his videos, and I could potentially gather more information about how the isolation from extended family is affecting them. Be very careful about that. Elena warned. Any investigation you conduct needs to stay on the right side of legal. No harassment, no showing up at their school, nothing that could be construed as stalking. What if I hired a private investigator? That's an option. A licensed PI would know how to gather information legally. But Mrs. Whitmore, before we go down this road, I need you to seriously consider whether this is what you want. Legal action will permanently damage your relationship with your son. There's no coming back from suing for grandparents' rights. My relationship with my son is already damaged. He's already chosen his girlfriend over his mother. The only question is whether I'm going to fight for my grandchildren or accept that I've lost them all. Then let me be clear about what you're signing up for. This will be expensive, probably $15,000 to $25,000 in legal fees. It will be emotionally draining. Your son and his girlfriend will paint you as controlling and intrusive. Every aspect of your life will be examined in court. And even if you win, you'll likely get limited visitation, a few hours every other weekend, maybe some holidays. A few hours is more than I have now. That's true. And I believe you have a legitimate case. But I want you to think about this carefully before we proceed. Take a week. Try once more to work things out with your son. If that fails, call me and we'll file the petition. I agreed, though I already knew what my decision would be. That night, I composed an email to Preston. Not a text, an email where I could say everything I needed to say without interruption.
Subject line, a final attempt at resolution. Preston, I've spent the last few days thinking about our situation, and I've come to some difficult conclusions. I understand that you're in a complicated position between Giselle and me. I understand that you're afraid of conflict and custody battles and the disruption to your children's lives.
But I need you to understand something. I am 70 years old. I don't have decades left to wait for you to find the perfect moment to introduce me to my grandchildren. Every day that passes is a day I'll never get back, a memory I'll never make with them. Your father died having met his grandchildren in secret, through deception and manipulation. He died carrying the weight of lies he told to protect me from pain. But his protection didn't work. I feel the pain now anyway. Only now I also carry the knowledge that he suffered alone because you were too afraid to do the right thing. I'm giving you one more chance to make this right. Bring the children to meet me. Let me be their grandmother, openly and honestly. Work with Giselle to find a solution that respects everyone's needs. But if you can't do that, if you're going to continue choosing Giselle's comfort over my relationship with your children, then I will pursue legal action. I've consulted with an attorney. I have a strong case for grandparents' visitation rights. I don't want to sue you, Preston. I don't want our relationship reduced to court-ordered visits and legal documents. But I will do it if that's the only way to know my grandchildren. You have 1 week to decide. Either arrange for me to meet the children or expect to receive a petition from my lawyer. I love you. I always will. But I will not sacrifice my grandchildren to preserve a relationship with you that's already been hollowed out by years of lies. Your mother, Beatrice. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Preston's response came 3 hours later. Mom, please don't do this. Please don't force a legal confrontation. I promise I'm working on Giselle, but these things take time. She's scared that you'll try to take over, that you'll undermine our parenting, that you'll judge her. Give me 1 more month. Let me prove to her that having you in the kids' lives won't be a threat. I'm making progress, I swear. Please, Mom, don't destroy our family with a lawsuit. Preston. I stared at his email for a long time. 1 more month, 1 more delay, 1 more excuse. How many months had already passed while Preston worked on Giselle? How many years? I drafted my response carefully. Preston, your father spent 3 years working on finding the right way to tell me the truth. He died without ever finding that perfect moment. I'm not willing to die waiting for you to grow a backbone. You have 7 days, not a month, 7 days to either bring my grandchildren to meet me or explain to a judge why you think I should be kept away from them. The choice is yours. Mom. After I sent it, I called Elena Martinez and put her on retainer. I want to be ready to file the petition immediately if my son doesn't comply, I explained. Understood. I'll start preparing the paperwork. Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to be absolutely certain about this. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. For the next 7 days, I waited. No response from Preston, no phone call, no surprise visit. Just silence. On day 7, I called Alina. File the petition, I said. It's time to fight.
Elena Martinez filed the petition for grandparents' visitation rights on a cold Monday morning in December. I watched her submit the documents electronically, feeling a mix of determination and dread settle in my chest. There was no going back now. The court will serve Preston and Giselle within 48 hours, Elena explained. They'll have 30 days to respond. Then we'll get a hearing date, probably sometime in late January or early February. What happens after they're served? I asked. They'll likely hire their own attorney. There will be back-and-forth motions, discovery requests, maybe attempts at mediation. Be prepared for this to get ugly, Mrs. Whitmore. Ugly was an understatement. Preston called me that Wednesday evening, his voice shaking with fury I'd never heard before. How could you do this? How could you actually sue us? I gave you a week, Preston. You chose silence. I was talking to Giselle. I was making progress. And now you've destroyed everything by bringing lawyers and courts into this. You had 11 years to make progress. I'm 70 years old. I don't have 11 more years to wait. The kids are terrified, Mom. A process server showed up at our house. Sophia was home sick from school and saw the whole thing. She asked why Grandma was suing Daddy. Do you have any idea how that felt to explain? The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't considered that the children might be aware of the legal proceedings. I'm sorry she was frightened, I said quietly. But Preston, she knows I exist now. That's more than she knew last week. She knows you exist as the woman taking us to court. Great first impression, Mom. If you'd let me meet her properly, there wouldn't need to be a court involved. Preston was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was tired rather than angry. Giselle wants to fight this. She's already contacted a lawyer. They're going to argue that you're a stranger to the children and that forced visitation would be traumatic. And what do you want, Preston? Another pause. I want my children to know their grandmother, but I don't want it to happen like this. Then drop your opposition to the petition. Agree to visitation voluntarily. We can stop this right now if you want to. I can't do that without Giselle's agreement. We're a partnership. A partnership where she makes all the decisions and you just agree? That's not fair. It's completely fair. You've been letting her control every aspect of your family's relationship with me since before your first child was born. When are you going to be your own person, Preston? He hung up without answering. The next few weeks were brutal. Giselle's lawyer filed a response that painted me as an overbearing, religious extremist grandmother who would attempt to indoctrinate the children and undermine their parents' secular progressive values. They included screenshots from my Facebook page showing me at church events, arguing that I would force unwanted religious exposure on the children. Elena countered with Theodore's videos showing him having warm, respectful relationships with the grandchildren without any religious pressure. We included testimonials from people who knew me, describing me as respectful, kind, and appropriate with children. The discovery process was invasive and humiliating. I had to provide financial records, medical history, documentation of my entire life. Giselle's lawyer requested my therapy records. I'd seen a grief counselor after Theodore died, trying to paint me as mentally unstable. But through it all, I held firm, because every piece of correspondence, every court filing, every legal document brought me one step closer to my grandchildren. The mediation session in January was a disaster. Giselle refused to speak directly to me, communicating only through her lawyer. Preston sat silently, looking miserable, as Giselle's attorney proposed a compromise of one supervised visit every 3 months. 4 times a year? I said incredulously. That's not a relationship. That's barely an acquaintance. My clients are willing to allow some contact, Giselle's lawyer said smoothly, but they have legitimate concerns about boundaries and the children's well-being. The children's well-being would be enhanced by knowing their grandmother, Elena shot back. We have expert testimony from child psychologists stating that grandparent relationships provide significant developmental benefits. We also have expert testimonies stating that forced contact with resistant grandparents can be traumatic. We left mediation without an agreement. The case would proceed to a full hearing. But something unexpected happened the week before the hearing was scheduled. I received a letter in the mail. Not from Preston, or Giselle, or the lawyers. The return address simply said Michael M.W. with Preston's street address. My hands shook as I opened it.
Dear Grandmother Beatrice, my name is Michael. I'm 11 years old, and I think I'm your grandson. Dad told us about you and about the court case. He seemed really sad about it. I wanted to write to you because I found something in Dad's office. It was a box with "For the Kids" written on it. Inside were letters, one for me, one for each of my siblings. The letters were from you. I read mine. You said you loved me even though we'd never met. You said you wanted to hear about my dreams of being an astronaut. You said you deserved to know where I came from. I've been thinking a lot about that, about where I come from. Mom doesn't like talking about family history. She says we should focus on our own nuclear family unit and not get caught up in generational patterns. But I want to know. I want to know about Grandpa Theodore, who died before I could really know him. I want to know about you. I want to know where Dad came from and what our family was like before.
I looked at the videos Grandpa made with us. I didn't know he was filming them as a grandfather. I thought he was just Mr. Theodore, the nice tutor. It made me sad to realize he couldn't tell us who he really was. Mom says you're trying to control our family and force your beliefs on us, but your letter didn't sound controlling. It just sounded like you loved us. I don't know if you'll get this letter. I'm mailing it secretly because I don't think Mom would want me to contact you, but I wanted you to know that at least one of your grandchildren wants to meet you. I hope the court lets you visit us. I have a lot of questions about Grandpa and about Dad when he was my age. Your grandson, Michael. I read the letter 5 times, tears streaming down my face. My brilliant, thoughtful grandson had found my letters, had read them, had reached out across the divide his parents had created. I called Elena immediately. Can we submit this to the court? Would it help our case? Elena was cautious. It's a letter from a minor written without parental consent. The other side could argue he was confused or that you somehow influenced him to write it. But yes, it demonstrates that at least one child wants contact with you. That's significant. I want to write back to him. Can I do that? Legally, yes, but it might complicate things if Giselle finds out. She could claim you're trying to manipulate the children behind their parents' backs. I don't care. He reached out to me. I'm not ignoring my grandson. I spent that evening crafting a careful response. Dear Michael, thank you for your brave and beautiful letter. It means more to me than you can possibly imagine. You are indeed my grandson, and I love you very much. I'm so glad you found my letter and that you understand why I wrote it. You asked about where you come from. Your grandfather, Theodore, was the kindest, most patient man I ever knew. He loved teaching and helping people understand difficult concepts. When he tutored you, he was being exactly who he always was, someone who believed in young people's potential. Your father was a lot like you when he was your age, curious, intelligent, always asking questions about how things worked. He loved science and space, too. I still have his old telescope in the attic. I hope very much that we'll get to meet soon. I have so many stories to share about your grandpa, about your dad, about our family. And I want to hear about you, your dreams, your interests, what you're learning and thinking about. You're right that I love you. I've loved you since before I knew you existed, and I'll keep loving you no matter what happens with the court case. Keep asking questions, Michael. Keep wanting to know where you come from. Your curiosity and thoughtfulness will serve you well in life. With all my love, your grandmother, Beatrice. P.S. Please be careful about keeping this correspondence secret if you think your mother would be upset. I don't want to cause problems for you at home, but know that you can always reach out to me, and I will always write back. I mailed the letter the next day, hoping it would reach him before the hearing. The hearing itself was scheduled for a cold Thursday in February. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, wanting to present as a stable, appropriate grandmother rather than the controlling religious extremist Giselle's lawyer had portrayed.
The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic settings from TV shows. Judge Patricia Holloway was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Preston and Giselle sat on the opposite side with their attorney. Preston looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Giselle's expression was coldly neutral. Neither of them looked at me. Elena presented our case methodically. Theodore's videos showing his relationship with the children, documentation of my attempts to have contact with Preston over the years, expert testimony about the benefits of grandparent relationships, and yes, Michael's letter, which Elena submitted, even knowing it was a risk. Giselle's lawyer argued passionately that forced visitation would disrupt the family's chosen lifestyle and expose the children to unwanted religious influence. They painted me as a woman who couldn't respect boundaries, who had resorted to legal threats instead of working cooperatively with the parents. Then came the surprise. Judge Holloway asked if the children could be interviewed in chambers. Giselle's lawyer objected strenuously, but the judge overruled. These children are old enough to have opinions about their own lives. I want to hear from them directly. The hearing was recessed while arrangements were made. An hour later, the judge returned. I have spoken with all 5 children, and their responses were illuminating. She looked directly at Giselle. Miss Mercado, your children are not as unified in their opinions as you might believe. The older 3, Michael, Lucas, and Sophia, all expressed curiosity about their grandmother and interest in meeting her. The younger 2, Emma and Olivia, were neutral but not opposed. Furthermore, I found Michael's letter to his grandmother to be genuine and heartfelt. This is a child actively seeking connection with his extended family, not a child being manipulated or coerced. She turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate your restraint in not attempting to contact the children directly beyond responding to Michael's letter. That shows good judgment.
Then she addressed both parties. Here's what I'm going to order. Mrs. Whitmore will have supervised visitation with all 5 children, 2 hours every other Saturday for a period of 3 months. Supervision will be conducted by a neutral third party agreed upon by both sides. During this period, Mrs. Whitmore will not discuss religion unless the children specifically ask questions, and even then, responses should be age-appropriate and respectful of the parents' wishes. Your Honor, Giselle's lawyer started to object. I'm not finished, Judge Holloway said sharply. After 3 months, we'll reconvene and assess how the visits are going. If they're proceeding smoothly, we'll discuss unsupervised visitation and potentially expended time. If there are legitimate problems, we'll address them. But I'm not going to deny these children access to their grandmother based on hypothetical concerns. She looked at Giselle and Preston directly. I understand you have strong feelings about your parenting choices, but children benefit from knowing their extended family. And Mrs. Whitmore has demonstrated no actual behavior that would make her a danger or negative influence. Your fears are not sufficient reason to deprive these children of a grandmother who clearly loves them. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. First visitation will be scheduled within 2 weeks. I sat in stunned silence as people gathered their papers and filed out. Elena squeezed my shoulder. You won. Not everything you wanted, but you won. As I stood to leave, Preston approached me. Giselle had already left the courtroom with her lawyer. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry for all of it. I should have been stronger. I should have fought for this years ago. What changed? Michael's letter. When I found out he'd written to you, I realized he was braver at 11 than I've been at 38. He asked me point blank why I was keeping him from knowing you, and I didn't have a good answer. And Giselle? Giselle is furious, but the judge is right. These are my children too, and I have a say in their lives. I'm done letting fear control my decisions. 2 weeks later, I met my grandchildren officially for the first time. The supervised visitation took place at a family resource center with a social worker named Denise observing from a comfortable distance. Preston brought all 5 children. who ranged from shy to curious to openly excited. Michael was the first to approach me. "Grandmother Beatrice?" "Call me Grandma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Just Grandma." He smiled, Preston's smile, Theodore's smile, and said, "Grandma, I brought my telescope. Dad said you have Grandpa's old one. Maybe we could look at the stars together sometime." I would love that more than anything. Sophia hung back until Michael waved her over. "This is Grandma. She's nice." Lucas shook my hand formally, then asked if I knew anything about building models. The twins climbed into my lap within 10 minutes, chattering about their kindergarten class and their pet hamster. 2 hours passed in a blur of stories, laughter, questions, and getting to know the 5 people who had been missing from my life for so long. When Preston came to pick them up, all 5 children hugged me goodbye. "Can we come back next week?" Emma asked. 2 weeks, I corrected gently. "But yes, we'll see each other again very soon." After they left, I sat in my car and cried, not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming relief and joy. 3 months later, Judge Holloway reviewed our case again. Denise's reports had been glowing. The children were thriving with the grandparent contact. There had been no boundary violations, no inappropriate religious pressure, no problems whatsoever. The judge expanded my visitation to unsupervised visits every Saturday afternoon, plus alternating holidays. Giselle still maintained her distance, but Preston brought the children faithfully every week. Over time, we built real relationships. I taught Michael advanced math the way Theodore had. I helped Sophia overcome her anxiety about public speaking. I built model rockets with Lucas. I baked cookies with the twins. They learned about their grandfather through stories and videos. They learned about their father's childhood. They learned where they came from. And I learned that sometimes fighting for what's right means being willing to lose everything else. I'd been prepared to permanently damage my relationship with Preston. Instead, standing up to him had finally made him stand up too. 6 months after finding that USB drive, I celebrated Christmas with all 5 grandchildren in my home. The house was filled with noise, laughter, wrapping paper, and love. Michael helped me put the star on top of the tree, Theodore's old star from 40 years of family Christmases. Sophia read the Christmas story from a children's book, not because I required it, but because she'd become interested in comparative religion and wanted to understand different traditions. Lucas built an elaborate Lego nativity scene. The twins made ornaments with glitter and chaos.
Preston helped me in the kitchen, and for the first time in over a decade, our relationship felt honest. "Dad would be proud of you," he said quietly, as we watched the kids through the doorway. "He'd be proud of you too. You finally found your courage. Only because you showed me what it looked like." That evening, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, I sat in Theodore's study with a cup of tea. The USB drive was still there, tucked safely in the desk drawer. "We did it," I said to his photo. "They know me now. They know they're loved. They know where they come from." I thought about the journey, the pain of discovery, the anger of betrayal, the determination to fight, and finally, the joy of connection. It hadn't been the way I had imagined becoming a grandmother. There had been no baby showers or birth announcements, no first steps witnessed or first words celebrated. Those moments were gone forever. But what I had now was real. 5 grandchildren who called me Grandma, who saved their questions and stories for our time together, who were building memories with me that would last their lifetimes. Sometimes the path to family is simple and straightforward, and sometimes you have to fight through courts and lawyers and years of lies to claim what was always rightfully yours. I'd done the fighting, I'd done the waiting, I'd survived the pain, and now, finally, I had my family back. The legacy Theodore had left me wasn't just those videos.
It was the courage to demand what my grandchildren deserved. A grandmother who loved them enough to fight for them, no matter the cost. And that legacy would live on in every Saturday afternoon, every holiday celebration, every story shared, and every hug exchanged. I was 70 years old, and I'd finally learned that sometimes love means being willing to go to war. And sometimes you win. Author's note. Thank you for following Beatrice's journey to the very end. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Comment below with your thoughts and let me know what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Remember, family relationships are worth fighting for, but they should be built on honesty, not control. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, and never underestimate the power of a grandmother's love. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and keep fighting for what matters.